Am I the a-hole for distancing myself from my high school best friend? I, 33F, have a high school best friend, also 33F, whom I've been close to since 2004. For almost 2 decades, we called each other best friends, but now, as adults, I'm starting to question our relationship and wonder if I'm the problem for stepping back. Back in 2017, my best friend went through a tough time. She got pregnant, and her partner left her while she was still carrying their child. I stepped in to help her out. I paid for her rent, food, and other necessities, without ever expecting anything in return. I genuinely wanted to support her. After a few months, her partner came back, and they got married. Fast forward to their married life. Her husband continued to cheat on her, and they struggled financially. She often borrowed money from me, and since I didn't have a child at the time, I could lend her some. However, years went by, and she never paid me back. I let it go because I valued our friendship more than money. In 2020, my life flipped upside down. I got pregnant, and the father of my child left me while I was still carrying. It was one of the darkest periods of my life. My family didn't know about my situation since I was working in the city, and I felt so alone. Desperate, I reached out to her to ask if she could pay back some of the money I lent her. Her response? She said she didn't have any money, but in the same conversation, she bragged about how her husband was earning a good salary. The worst part was when I started noticing her subtle digs at my situation. I confided in her because I needed someone to talk to, someone to share my fears and struggles with. At first, she seemed supportive, but then her advice started to feel off. For example, my newborn had a protein allergy and needed special milk and distilled water. Instead of encouraging me to find ways to provide for my baby's needs, she told me to give him regular milk like what her neighbor did with their baby. She even said I should use mineral water instead of distilled because I was spoiling my baby. I began to sense that her advice wasn't meant to help me, but to see me struggle. Things escalated when I told her that someone had anonymously sent me a box of milk for my baby. Instead of celebrating this small victory with me, she brushed it off and made comments about how being a single mom was a weakness. She'd say things like, "At least my husband came back to me after leaving. You weren't even worth going back to." One time, I told her I was eating porridge because I spent all my money on milk for my baby. Instead of offering empathy, she laughed and said, "Good. Now you know what it feels like to eat porridge. Haha." Despite all this, I tried to keep our friendship afloat. I returned to my province with my baby and worked tirelessly to make ends meet. I sold street food, delivered online orders, and even took on a low-paying job as an encoder. I hustled day and night while she kept criticizing everything I did. Yet, I still found myself giving her money whenever she said her kids had nothing to eat. When I finally got a better-paying job as a virtual assistant, my life improved. I could provide for my son comfortably. I encouraged her to try working as a VA too, and even offered to help her get started, but she refused, saying it was too hard. Instead, she kept complaining about her financial situation. Over time, I realized she didn't want to fix her problems. She wanted me to fix them for her. I decided to stop giving her financial help and just offered advice instead. But even that felt futile because she didn't want advice. She just wanted to vent and repeat the same problems without making any effort to change. She'd trauma dump on me every day and constantly talk badly about other people to feel better about herself. What broke me was when she started making personal comments about me. She'd say things like, "You're getting fat, and those love handles don't look good on you," or "Your toes look like shriveled vegetables," every time she finds out I am taking beauty supplements and invest money for my skincare. Her opinion at that time slightly affected me. I checked my toes if they really looked like ginger, but I don't see them like it. She even called herself blessed because, despite having many kids, she stayed slim. I am happy for her about it, but giving her opinion about my body was so uncalled for. And she knew I was struggling with PCOS and thyroid problem, that's why I couldn't just lose weight like normal people do, even though I work out every day. I am pretty confident with my body, and I dress nicely every day, and I don't know if I am just assuming things, but I feel like she's trying to kill my confidence in a very subtle way. It felt like everything I shared with her, my struggles, my achievements, even my hobbies, became ammunition for her negativity. Whenever I told her about something good in my life, like picking up a new hobby or watching a street dance with my son, she'd find a way to downplay it. She'd either ignore it or turn the conversation back to herself. To be fair, I always celebrated her wins, big or small, because I am genuinely happy for her and wish her to have a good life for real. Sometimes she'd ask me in our chats what I had for dinner, and I'd tell her. Then she'd be like, "Oh, that sounds boring or bitter." Whenever I mentioned buying something for my son, like a new bike, she'd go on about spoiling him and how he'll turn out lazy and all that negative stuff. But the thing is, she knows my son is actually really responsible for his age because I give him tasks and chores every day. He's only 4, by the way. I'm all about teaching him the value of saving money, but also showing him it's okay to treat himself for a job well done. She knows full well that the money I used to buy the bike came from months of saving up. In fact, it was her who constantly complained about her kids being glued to their phone and not helping her even with the simple house chores. When I'm busy with work or my hobbies, she always interrupts by calling or texting, making it hard to focus. So, I made the decision to mute her on all platforms. Every Sunday since last December, my son and I go to church. Despite knowing this, she still calls and texts me, pretending it's important when it's not. Most of the time, she gossips about others and compares herself, thinking she's superior. I find that kind of negative talk disrespectful, and I've told her so. But she only stops briefly before starting again. I advised her to focus on her own progress rather than comparing herself to others. She often brings up my single mother status as if it's a weakness, but I see it as a badge of strength and independence. I made it clear to her that if she wants to criticize me, she should find something else to target because being a single mother is something I am proud of. Lately, I've started distancing myself from her. I've been focusing on my son, my work, and my personal growth. She's noticed and has been trying to pull me back into her world, messaging me constantly and complaining whenever I don't reply immediately. I understand that she's been through a lot, and I know she might feel abandoned, but I've also realized that her actions and words have taken a huge toll on me emotionally. I'm finally at a place in my life where I feel stable, and I don't want to lose that progress by staying in a friendship that feels so one-sided and toxic. So, am I the a-hole for pulling away from my best friend of almost 20 years? I feel guilty because she's been through a lot, but I also can't ignore how toxic our friendship has become.